And here we are for part 2 of Distortions, part of Markets, chapter 5, packet 4. Earlier, we talked about the situation here. We have a chronic shortage that resulted from a price ceiling when a third party caused a distortion to a market that was assumed to work perfectly fine until somebody stepped in and ruined it all. Well, did it really ruin it? These people think so because they would have had apartments otherwise. These people think so because they're wasting their time looking for one. And these people think, oh, this is great. Look how cheap my apartment rent is. But again, don't forget, the landlord would have maintenance issues. Costs would go crazy and there would be trouble. A lot of people who have rent control don't exactly enjoy it so much compared to what they could have otherwise had in their apartments. Opportunity cost, sports fans. Let's look at the other side. Let's look at you. The typical teenage employee is called entry-level labor. Now, up until this recent fracas, problem, contratemps, shutdown, virus, panicdemic, whatever you want to call it. The data, by the way, does not support the lockdown, but that's another story. See that later. Let's say before all this happened, like January 2020 and earlier, you guys could get a job, and you would likely be paid minimum wage. At least that's what they would call it. Minimum wage. This started back in the 30s as an idea, and it was not a bad idea necessarily, but the minimum wage, what it is a wage that cannot go down to X. Remember, X marks a spot, forces of competition between supply pushes down, forces of competition between demanders pushes it up. At X marks a spot, PE1, QE1, everybody's happy. But when the third party steps in, remember, government typically, could also be unions, could be insurance companies and others. Anyone who is not a supplier or a demander in that market is a third party. They come in and they say, oh, this wage is not enough. Vote for me and I'll make it $15 an hour. Heard of that before? It's out there. $15 an hour. This is not a living wage. We need to make a living, they call it living wage. You know, like you're just going to fall off your couch having done nothing in your life and get a job that's going to pay you enough to live forever. No, it's an entry-level labor. This is a job that you get for a while and then you move up. Remember, your first job does nothing but tell people you can show up when you're supposed to and do what you're supposed to do. That's all a first job does. It doesn't indicate your skills necessarily or your degrees, your education, your experience, none of that. Your first job is just, hey, I show up, I do it, I get it done. And then you move on to your second or third job where you start to make real money, but that's called a career. Okay, entry-level labor. I'm going to vote for that person because that person cares more, because that person's going to raise my wages. I'm going to make more money if I vote for that person to $15. Yeah, so I'm going to call that P high. Let's call $15 an hour or whatever. We're going to call that P high. So by the way, where did they get $15 an hour as a minimum wage? Why not make it 20? In fact, vote for me. I'll make it 25. Oh, yeah? Vote for me. I'll make it 50. I mean, really, where's the limit as to what a minimum wage should be if we're not going to use X marks the spot? So $15, I mean, come on, man. We can go higher than that. Let's go to 30. $30 an hour. Why 15? That's chump change. Gee. And some of you are probably thinking, well, that will cause inflation. Excuse me. That will not cause inflation. See my inflation lesson coming in the future. Anyway, what it does cause is what we're about to see. So we take this price, which is above X marks a spot, and of course we shoot across because it's a price-directed system. We hit our demand curve here. So this down here must be our quantity demanded, and then we'll make a little note here, QD. We take this bad boy, we continue to shoot across, and now we hit our supply curve. Drop that down, and this is quantity supplied. And you'll notice we have a gap in between. Is this a shortage? Is this a surplus? Exactly. It's a no, it's a surplus. QS is greater than QD. From 0 to QD is quantity demanded, willing and able at that price. From 0 to QS is quantity supplied, willing and able at that price. Earlier, you may recall you had a lesson that established if a price is above or prices below, it creates a shortage or a surplus, even though QS and QD do not move. They do not shift. Nothing's happening here to QS. Excuse me. Nothing's happening here to supply. Nothing's happening here to demand. It's just X marks the spot. But a third party comes in and establishes this price. Oh, man, this is great. Look how much money you'll make an hour now, huh? Good luck finding a job that pays that much an hour. Because check it out. What this results in is called a price floor. This is a price floor. The price wants to go down, like we've established before. Price always wants to go down to X. It wants to go up to X. It wants to go to X. And in this case, we notice that there is a floor, just like underneath your feet, that keeps you falling. There is something that prevents price from going down to X. P is price. P is pirate. Pirates want to go to X. Price wants to go to X. The forces of competition between suppliers is greater than the forces of competition between demanders. I mean, this is like gravity, folks. You can say, I don't like gravity. Go up on your rooftop, jump off, and say, I'm going to fly, and see how that works out. Don't do it. You know better. It won't work. Now I hope you know better here, too. Guess what else doesn't work? You can't arbitrarily third-party step in and establish a price and say, that's the way it should be, because you will make a price floor. And what's this down here? A what? Yes, it is a surplus. And this surplus will not go away. So this surplus won't go away, and we call it a chronic surplus. A surplus that doesn't go away. So what? Big deal. What's the big problem here? Well, let me show you. Let's go, sure. You might recall from 0 to QD are businesses who are demanders of labor. That's, by the way, if you remember circular flow model, this is a resource market, a factor market. Businesses demand this much labor. Oh, here we go again. Let's just flip this puppy over. From here to here, businesses are willing and able to buy this much labor. But people, you and I in households provide or supply labor. We're willing to have our quantity supplied at that price quite a bit more. In other words, you and I want to work way more than what they want to hire us to do the work. Remember, businesses don't supply jobs. They supply goods, they supply services. They do not supply jobs. You and I demand work, not jobs. You don't look for a job, you look to work. Totally different attitude, you'll be more successful in life. Anyway, are these people happy? Sure. Look what they would have made an hour. And look what they're making an hour now. This rectangle, which looks like a square because the squares are rectangles, this bad boy is more money in their pockets than they would otherwise make. They like it. You betcha. Meanwhile, how about these people here? From the QD to what would be X marks the spot QE1, where it would be the number of people employed. Right here, we're going to draw that line. These people would, if we left it alone, these people would be employed. But due to minimum wage, due to this price floor that it creates, due to the chronic surplus, these people are not employed because businesses are not willing and able to hire beyond this point, or they will lose money and they'll go out of business. Gee, like it's happening a bunch right now. I'm saying this in early May 2020. Can you say coronavirus pandemic? Can you say lockdown by governments and governesses and governors and mayors and such? They're killing business. Anyway, back before, remember? So anyway, here we are. Everybody's happy and they're getting work here, but these people are looking for work and are not finding work. Hello. They're victims. You see, if we left it alone, these people would find work and they would get their first job at minimum wage. No, at whatever the market dictates, they would get their first job. They're victims. How about these people over here? You'll notice here we have people who are willing to provide their labor for this price up here. but they're not finding work either. Businesses stop hiring at this point, and these people are looking for work. Now, if we left everything alone and X marks the spot was perfect, and we had a PE and a QE and everybody was happy, these people still would not find work because they would say, hey, look at my supply of labor. I am willing and able to provide labor at these higher prices, which is above what would be X marks the spot. So these people have overpriced their labor and would not want to work at that wage anyway. In other words, at this wage rate, at this price of labor, they're willing to look for work, but they're not going to find it. And they wouldn't find it anyway, so we're wasting their time. These people would find work, but cannot, so they're victims. So these people are all victims. So what about these people? Do they make out? Yes, they might make out, but good luck finding it. Which results, this whole thing results in a problem. Remember, your first job is simply to prove you show up on time, get it done, and then they get your second or third job, which is better. What it results in is this situation. Typically, you're looking for work when you're 16-ish. But what if you cannot find work when you're 16-ish? Because of minimum wage, like we showed here, right? Fewer people are being employed. Well, that means you don't find your job till later in life, your first job, which results in your second job, etc. In other words, oh gosh, I don't like that. Let's try this. Let's say you get your first job when you're 19 instead of when you're 16. Look what happens here. Oh, good, it worked. Do you see this area right here? This area here is money you would have made throughout your life that you're not going to make now. This is opportunity cost, and it's not to scale, but this is money you've lost. You will not realize you've lost it unless you take a class like this one, and you're like, oh, economics sucks because it's so sad and terrible and evil. It shows us how bad things really... Yep, it's like gravity. Sorry, I hate it too. But this is what happens to people in minimum wage. And notice that it's not just one person. Multiply this by everybody. And typically when you retire and stop making money, your area of lifetime income is less than it would have otherwise been. This is a result of a distortion. A third party, not supplier, not demander, stepping into a perfectly fine market and messing it up. It results in a price floor where price wants to go down to X but cannot because there's a floor in the way. And it results in a chronic surplus of labor, or whatever it is, whatever market, a chronic surplus of whatever it is because the price is above what it should be. They have a situation like this in Pennsylvania when it comes to milk. The state of Pennsylvania has dictated that the price of milk will be so much a gallon, which is typically above X, and results in a lot of extra milk. Or the U.S. Department of Agriculture subsidizing dairy farmers, which in effect does the same thing, a surplus of milk, which is oftentimes wasted. And there's another example for you who are students. Because of this artificially high price, this could be applied to teachers in public schools in Michigan. Now, I'm not saying in other states, I'm saying Michigan. In Michigan, we have unions and a third party, not supplier, not demander. A third party has come in and negotiated with school boards and dictated a price that's above X. And guess what that does? That means there are fewer teachers working in public schools in Michigan than otherwise would be. This is not to scale, but the point is valid. What does that mean to you as a student? Well, if you go into teaching, understand there are fewer positions to find. Many would have been teachers but won't be. And some will become teachers or want to become teachers yet not find that position available because of this chronic surplus of labor, of teachers in this market that has been distorted. For students, that's you guys, notice what would happen if we let X marks the spot play. We would have more teachers working, which would mean for you as a student, more classes, more choices, smaller numbers perhaps. These are opportunity costs. Perhaps we like the way it is. Okay, but understand what you're giving up to gain. So ladies and gentlemen, we have discussed distortions. We have discussed a price ceiling, which results in a chronic shortage. A third party dictates a price below X. And we have talked about a surplus that's chronic, doesn't go away, price floor, third party dictates a price above X. Distortion. Not cool.